back from recess. Senator Duane, you should still have the floor.
Sidus Masi, Mr. Speaker. So when we went to recess, I was proffering an amendment and discussing the bill as substituted. So, Mr. Speaker, it looks as though I was able to attain a copy in terms of what the amended version did. Looks like it may have changed page numbers with some additions of language. So for those that are following along, to put context into this, Mr. Speaker, what I mentioned earlier, if you go to line 18 on page 9, it says the contract type. This lays out the contract type, which is required in this legislation. The Guam Memorial Hospital Authority, GMHA, shall enter into a contract based on public-private partnership with a private entity for purposes of improving the operational efficiency and healthcare provision of the hospital. And then A on line 22, A, the contract for management services of GMHA shall be defined by the P3 committee. B, the RFP developed by the P3 committee shall delineate a comprehensive scope of services expected from the private partner. At a minimum, the following services shall be included. And here's where we go in our 1 through 6 in terms of the services to be provided. The reason why I go through the 1 through 6, Mr. Speaker, is in speaking with you even during the recess, number 3 of those 6 says streamline of daily operations to improve efficiency and reduce costs. So in my opinion, Mr. Speaker, below the enumerated responsibilities and structure, C provision arrives. And the way I find it very difficult to do number 3, when C says the contract shall include a provision safeguarding the employment of all current classified non-management staff, like I said, management's not protected, staff members at GMHA. This provision will guarantee that these staff members retain their status as classified government of Guam employees and the associated retirement and all their benefits conferred upon them by the government without disruption due to the transition to a new management model. Now, I do agree with the sentence after that, because this is actually what happens in the government when you restructure and you do reorganization. Government employees have bumping rights. They have rights to positions that are like positions in other agencies. Most of the government of Guam's position descriptions have some sort of uniformity in them. And I would find it, unless it was in the clinical staff and the specialties, I find it probably pretty consistent if we go into the staffing pattern for GMHA, that you'll find a lot of positions that are concurrent in all the other operations of GMHA that have position descriptions within other government of Guam line agencies, as well as even autonomous agencies, really. So the reason why I propose this once again, Mr. Speaker, is I don't believe that if we're truly trying to do this, if we're truly trying to do a public-private partnership, if we're truly asking a private entity to come in and respond to this and be able to execute a contract that is designed to be a public-private partnership, to bring in private management, to restructure and do things that's going to be required to accomplish what we're saying we're trying to accomplish here, and basically have no control over classified employment, I just don't think it's going to work. And I don't even think we would get a meaningful response, to be honest with you. So the amendment is line 12 to 17. I believe this is, well, it will be page 10 from one of the excerpts I'm reading. But anyways, on C, we would strike, the contract shall include a provision for safeguarding the employment of all current classified non-management staff members at GMHA. This provision will guarantee these staff members retain their status as classified government of Guam employees and associated retirement of the benefits conferred upon them by the government without disruption due to the transition of a new management model. That is all struck through, Mr. Speaker. We do retain the Department of Administration shall assist the committee in structuring transfers or other merit protections for classified employees. For classified employees, exactly. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that in order to be able to be true to ourselves, to be able to effectuate what we're saying we want to effectuate here, and once again, I want to remark, I do not have the credentials to be able to state what is the employee requirements for GMHA. I have never served on the board. I have never served in management. I have never had to do any work associated with the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority in terms of what it requires for day-to-day operations. But I do know this, Mr. Speaker. I do know that it is not us, but many, many meetings that I've had with members of the medical community throughout, whether it's CEOs that run clinics, current private hospital, whether it's doctors themselves, other nurses, other clinicians, make the claim that they believe that there are opportunities to have cost savings at GMHA because of the large number of employees at the Guam Memorial Hospital, particularly when you compare it to a private hospital that we currently have operating with the same bed capacity. I've heard some arguments which I agree with, Mr. Speaker. We did this in the budget hearing, that the Guam Memorial Hospital must take and must treat all. That's true. All hospitals have to do that. Now, what I understand is other hospitals do a model of stabilize, treat, transfer. So I understand that as well. I understand that in terms of the clinical arrangements, there are times where in our public hospital, they have to go above and beyond what is typical within care. So I do understand all of that, all of those issues that surround. The thing is that if we're asking a professional to come in and respond to this, these decisions are going to have to be left to them. They are going to have to see whether they concur with what is widely speculated in our community, within the medical community, that there are opportunities to lessen the burden by reducing employment at GMHA. That is going to be their responsibility. We're not telling them go in and transfer out 100 employees, 200 employees. We're not saying that by eliminating this. But what we're saying, if we say that they cannot do this, I believe, Mr. Speaker, that we're setting up this whole process for failure. Because we know that every government of Guam entity that we provide a budget for out of this legislature, especially after the 22% pay increase, I will be surprised if there's any entity that has above 7% capabilities within their budget for operations. I believe that every single line agency, and we will be able to enumerate that in the budget process, and I'm going to ask OFB to run that, their staff and benefits, staffing requirements and benefits, I don't believe any agency would be below 90%. And I believe most of them would be pushing 93 to 95%. And this is the reason why in our government, a lot of times we cannot do things in our agencies because they have personnel, but they lack the money for contracts. They lack the money for equipment. They lack the money for supplies because salaries and benefits are eating up the lion's share of the budget. And so being true to ourselves, if we're really going to go down this road, and as I close, I was talking to some of my colleagues earlier too, whether we do this now, for the new hospital, if it's deliberated in this legislature, because I know it's contemplated in the financing, this will not be business as usual. The new hospital will be structured under a leaseback and a public-private partnership, I believe, regardless. And I know that if that happens, there is no way they are going to assume all the methods, management style, operations that currently exist at GMH. So if we're doing it now, we might as well do it right. And by not allowing that management team to come in and deal with personnel requirements, I believe that this bill will be ineffective and will do nothing to change the operational duties and requirements at GMH. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Dueñas. On the amendment proffered by Senator Dueñas, are there any? Gentlelady from Zonia, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the proffer of the amendment. And honestly, this language was put into the bill, although I may agree, maybe not even required, because we're bound by the Organic Act and the merit system to take care of merit system employees, regardless of transfer of duties to a private company or whatever else we do here. This language actually put into the bill to make sure that employees know that we understand that, and that no employee or senator was going to panic and freak out that we did not understand that we have a merit system duty to these merit system employees. So I have no objection that it's not going to be put as a contract provision, because there is nothing in here that's intending that this is going to be a duty of the contractor. It's really something that just the P3 committee, I think, needs to help to direct employees of where to go, and leaving it solely on DOA and not the rest of the P3 committee is fine with me. I have no objection to that. I just want everyone to remember when technology outgrew the government's ability to provide telecom services, the GTA, our Government of Guam telephone services, the legislature, in allowing for that privatization, transferred or ensured a process for employees that were merit system employees, and that's why it says non-management, to take care, to be taken care of according to the merit system. Not anything more, not anything less. So I just want to make sure that it's in this bill so that everybody can rest assured that that is not an impediment to passing the bill, that there's nothing that's taking away any of those rights of the employees. There's nothing that's mandating a contractor to take those employees, because one of the efficiencies, as many of us believe, is really going to be in their ability to work personnel, reassign or rework personnel so that they can be efficient in the performance of their duties. That's what the studies have shown, where PPPs have been effective because of their ability to manage personnel in that way. So again, the bill was not intended to put any duty on the contractor, but a duty on the P3 committee making the RFP and on the DOA. So, but I'm okay with this amendment. I have no objection to it where it's going to be solely on DOA.
Thank you, ma'am. On the amendment. On the amendment. Any discussions on the amendment? Senator Dueñas, would you like to close?
Mr. Speaker, and I'm quite satisfied with the author agreeing to this. But one of the things, and I do believe also that there is common knowledge. I think reiterating this, and I think the provision of DOA still staying in there is very clear. It is their duty, it is their responsibility. It was Ms. Lou Perez's responsibility when she came in 2003 to the firestorm of I think $260 million in general fund revenue, a mere pittance compared to what we're running our government with right now at $1.4 billion. So yeah, I believe that this is strong enough, and one of the things we always want to avoid, Mr. Speaker, and I think you and many of my colleagues concur with this, is we want to remove any confusion, ambiguity, or language that could be interpreted otherwise in order to have a clean bill, and to understand that what we're trying to accomplish here doesn't bind, and that language to me, although it's a restatement of what government employment rights are, it could be misinterpreted, and I think just by eliminating it, it removes all question on it, but DOA still having its duties and responsibilities to manage any government employees' rights to their employment and the contract that they've been given as a classified employee is still durable in this bill. So I thank the author for agreeing and the body for agreeing to this amendment. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move that we vote on the amendment.
Okay, on the amendment, are there any objections to the amendment? Any objections? Hearing, seeing no objection. Okay. Motion carries. Senator Duane, you still have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to listen as the debate goes forward. I think the bill definitely attempts to do what I know that we're going to do, whether or not it happens in this legislature or what a future legislature is probably going to contemplate when it comes to a new hospital, whatever version that looks like, whether it's a complex or a hospital or whatever. We know, Mr. Speaker, when we debated this in the 36th in terms of the windfall of money that came to Guam through the provisions that EITC was no longer borne by our government, and we had $60 million in additional revenue now to deal with. That was the typical spend that we were, having to fork out to handle the EITC. That's what prompted this body to move forward, and that committee did a good job. It structured a bill really that has a lot of parameters in it, and it fundamentally speaks to not only the possibility of a leaseback, but a public-private partnership in order to ensure the viability of such a substantial endeavor. At the time, it was contemplating $750 million. I think we all know in today's money, even a hospital is going to be upwards of $1 billion, and whatever else happens, happens. But I think for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I'm inclined, to take a shot at it at this point. Like I said, I'll continue to listen and see if there's any other dissenting voices or anything I haven't seen within the bill, but, we're going to have to take a swing at it at some point, and so maybe this is the provision to do that. I'll continue to listen, and I appreciate the author's efforts, and I appreciate this amendment passing. Thank
you very much, Senator Duane. On the bill, are there any senators wishing? Ma'am, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have just a real simple amendment to proffer to Bill 13, and it is line 10, page 6, to amend the bill to read representative from the Guam Nurses Association. It currently states nursing, but it should state nurses. To correct, yes.
So the amendment is
to change, to correct Guam Nursing Association to Guam Nurses Association.
Okay. So this is on page 6, line 10. It's just change the word nursing to nurses.
Yes.
Okay. Any objections? It's just changing nursing to nurses. Madam, yes?
Yes, no objection. I just want to thank the author of the amendment for that correction, and I appreciate that.
You're very much welcome.
Thank you. I'd also just like to say a few words on the bill.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, that's for this. You want to speak on the amendment, or do you want to speak on the bill?
No, not on the amendment.
Okay, so let's go ahead and dispose of your amendment. That you still have the floor. Okay. So on the amendment, No objections? So ordered. Ma'am, you can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the Guam Memorial Hospital, I think we all know that it is facing financial and operational costs that, and a crisis that can no longer be ignored. And like the author of this bill mentioned, status quo is no longer an option. And so I do rise in support of this bill and effectuating change. The previous speaker mentioned discussions that we had with the governor. Mr. Speaker, you were there, and myself. And one of the things that I had mentioned and raised was that we do need change. She talked about the preliminary assessment from the independent contractor, Mr. Andy Lika. And I asked, what could she tell us about the preliminary assessment with regard to management? And she did state, and I can't wait to see this report, about how there are good people that work at the Guam Memorial Hospital. And I agree. The management team, they are good people. But I told her, and I'll repeat it, that the administrator has to go. She has to go. And status quo, again, is no longer an option. So again, I do support Bill 13, and I look forward to its passage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. On the bill, gentlelady from Tumuning, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to stand in full support of this legislation. Thank goodness. Thank goodness this body is starting to move forward and do something, because that's exactly what the people of Guam is expecting. They've been waiting way too long for us to finally make a move, and this is what we're going to do. But let's go further back. It's not just this time. The hurdles that we have to endure to try and get something like this through, don't think that even if this bill passes, that we're not going to have resistance from the administration. They'll most likely be. For an example, I believe it was in the 33rd Guam Legislature when Senator Rodriguez introduced legislation to have an RFP that the good author was mentioning earlier, an RFI. Actually, it's a request for information through GITA. And it was a hard work of this individual senator with 238 pages long of why we should be moving in a direction to revamp the hospital. And one of them was the public-private partnership. And that's why this bill was created back then. So as I was doing more research on this, I decided to call GITA because the bill basically asks GITA to put out this RFI. And when I did ask somebody at GITA, their response was, oh, we really can't do anything because we're waiting for the appraisal of the land. Well, Mr. Speaker, when the bill was introduced from Senator Rodriguez many years ago, there wasn't land that was up for grabs at this point. So I really quite didn't understand it. But I greatly appreciate GITA at least giving me some kind of answer so that now I can call for an oversight hearing and ask them why these things are not been addressed. Unfortunately, everybody's off island. Everyone. From the acting director to the assisting acting director, everybody's off island. But this gives us an opportunity, this body an opportunity to move forward. Mr. Speaker, for years, Guam Memorial Hospital has struggled. Leaking ceilings, broken equipment, and the lack of basic supplies have turned into a place of uncertainty rather than healing. Our people fear seeking care. Can you imagine that? They're afraid to go to Guam Memorial Hospital. And our healthcare workers are forced to operate in hazardous conditions. We've watched our hospital deteriorate, waiting for change that never came. Now we have an opportunity to fix what is broken. A public-private partnership is the way forward. By collaborating with industry experts, we can rebuild and modernize the hospital, ensuring efficiency, safety, and financial stability, while protecting the employees of the Guam Memorial Hospital. This model has worked other places, elsewhere. This model has worked. Providing that we fund the necessary health services effectively and fairly. That's the important part too, is funding. Whether or not patients can afford to pay is one thing that this hospital is burdened. Not burden, it's a responsibility for them. But funding is needed. And we have to put our foot to the pedal on this. We can no longer sit idle. People cannot wait for 5 years for a new hospital to come up. If you're sick today, what are you supposed to do? Oh, I can't see a doctor. I have to wait another 5 years because I don't want to go to this particular hospital. It's not safe, and I'm scared, and I just don't want to go. You know how hard it is to get people to even have a physical every year? It's very difficult to push people in that direction. And it's sad that we're in this state. When people come to visit Guam, it's embarrassing. Our hospital is the biggest thorn in our side, alongside with the epidemic on ice. But it's one of the biggest thorns in our side. Mr. Speaker, I don't know why I keep saying Mr. Chair all day today, but I'm so sorry. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to proffer an amendment that I believe my colleagues have on their desks, and I think this is very important. And even though I'm sure that this group of individuals coming together, the P3, could incorporate it, I just want to make sure it does happen, because it's that important. And this amendment, colleagues, is page 9, line 8. So if you go to there. I'm sorry, this is line 7, page 9. And it's to add language to section 98103, contract type of the bill to read. 5, upgrades to information technology infrastructure to support patient care and administrative functions while strengthening cybersecurity measures to protect sensitive data, ensure compliance, and mitigate potential threats. Okay, I'm sure everybody was saying that there was another bill that was out, and I'm hoping, Mr. Speaker, that I am on the right page.
Yes, you are.
Okay, because I know that there was another, amended version versus another version. So this basically, Mr. Speaker, is important. Cybersecurity is the defining threat of our time today. This is the new crime of today. Hitting government data, crippling essential services, and jeopardizing national security. We cannot afford to be reactive. Our hospital must take decisive action, fortifying this defense before digital sabotage spirals into a full-blown crisis. What we all have to remember, this body has to remember, is prevention isn't just cheaper than recovery. It's the difference between protection and disaster. And for those reasons, I ask my colleagues to please support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, ma'am. On the amendment to add to subsection 5 found on page 9, line 7. After the word functions is remove the semicolon, remove the semicolon, and add the words while strengthening cybersecurity measures to protect sensitive data, ensure compliance, and mitigate potential threats. Okay, on the amendment, the gentlelady from Georgia, you're recognized.
Mrs. Mossy, I want to thank the author for this amendment. It's a good amendment. I have to admit, I missed that one, and I'm glad that we are going to have additional protections of data, especially because of one of the incidences that happened at GMH in our recent past is that they shut down their machines because they said there was a breach. Some former employee had access to the machines. Whether that was by design or not, that shutdown really set them back. And I know that they work very hard, but it set them back so far in their collections and their revenue projections that they had made for us in that fiscal year. So I'm glad for this additional protection. Sizos Masi to the sponsor.
Thank you, ma'am. On the amendment, gentleman from the EPAN, you're recognized.
Sidus Masi, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to rise and commend the author of the amendment for this good catch, and also for just being consistent as I know she's the chair of the Committee on Technology, and she's been very consistent about closing the loopholes and just being vigilant relative to the cybersecurity, not just at the hospital, but government-wide. So, of course, I stand in full support of this amendment. Sidus Masi, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. On the amendment, gentlelady from Barragata, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in full support of this amendment. It wasn't too long ago that I attended a GPA symposium where they talked about how a cybersecurity threat actually shut down a hospital. They're not only the financial system, but also the equipment, the life-saving equipment. And so the FBI fortunately was able to step in and save the day. And so I think this is a really critical amendment, and I thank the good author, Sidus Masi.
You're very welcome. On the amendment, gentleman from Jigo, sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I fully support that amendment. That's one of the most proactive amendments I've seen in any of the bills. Let's not wait for to do something, reactive. Let's be proactive, and it's good. Thank you.
You're very welcome. On the amendment, gentlelady from Barragata.
I just wanted, Sidus Masi, Speaker, I just wanted to commend the author of the amendment. This is a really good amendment to include it. In the recent times, our agencies have been experiencing malfunctions of our systems, so safeguarding information technology, putting in place infrastructure is really good. So I commend the author of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On the amendment, any objections to the amendment? Okay, then hang on. Okay, I just wanted to make sure so we can move these things along. Okay. Ma'am, now you can close.
I can close. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for this. And I thank my colleagues who stood up and supported this amendment. And I was hoping I could get at least 4 more people standing up and supporting this amendment, only because I'm going to hit them up when it comes down to funding the OTEC, Office of Technology. Because they have been left behind for so long. So please, colleagues, when time comes and we have to find money for them, they need it. They're going to be the firewall of all this government of Guam, being proactive, like my good colleague from GIGO said, it's less costly to be proactive than it is reactive. So I thank everyone for their kind words, but most especially for their generosity when it comes to OTEC during budget time. Thank you.
Okay. Any objections to the amendment? No objections to the amendment. Motion carries. On the bill. Any senator wishing to speak on the bill? Gentlelady from Barragata, you recognize, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in full support of this bill, and I really commend the author. She has been trying to address all the issues of GMH step by step, from every appropriation bill, you know, and you know, oversights and what have you. And I really like the fact that this P3 committee is going to look at, incorporate the RFP 24-006, in which they're going to analyze the needs of the population, look at organizational, programmatic, and fiscal challenges, analyze regulatory accreditation mandates, and look at potentially untapped revenue streams. I think also what this PPP could bring is perspective. I think perspective is one thing we lose, or what's one thing that we need when we're looking to fix chronic problems, and especially with expertise. So we definitely need not only the perspective, but the expertise that this confirm can bring. Because I also agree with the sponsor that it's not just the lack of money, which we know exists in many community hospitals across the United States, but also the problem is I think, you know, I think a problem that exists in Guam, where we know people, and therefore it somehow colors our ability to act objectively. And so I think this is we're at this point where we really need to save our hospital, and the people, especially helping our people who are serviced by this hospital. That's what this is about. It's really about helping our people heal. And I think we're at this point. You know, we did everything possible to help the hospital. We're at this point where, you know, we have to try something different. And I'm willing to try that. And I thank the author for working hard, doing her homework, looking at everything possible to get this hospital to succeed. And I think that's what all of us want. So thank you.
You're very welcome. On the bill, gentleman from MIPAN, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to rise in full support of what I believe is one of the solutions that we need to implement at the Guam Memorial Hospital. You know, I miss my good colleague, Senator Brown, because every time we discuss the issue of the hospital or healthcare, she used to always say this line, elect a nurse, they said. And look how well that's worked out for us. So I'm very actually encouraged. I'm not an optimist normally, but I'm encouraged by the support that this measure is getting here on the floor today, because you know, we have to ask ourselves, what is the definition of kaduku? I say it's doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. And we have been allowing GMH to do the same thing over and over and over again. And I don't think anyone can argue that the results need to change. And I think it's very clear. You know, we had a very courageous testimony in a public hearing in the last term with Nurse Isabel Flores, and she hit the nail right on the head. It's the management. It's the management. You can't expect to put people in with these political ties, and they're not going to do anything to hold the institution responsible, because their loyalty doesn't lie with the institution, it lies on political lines. And I agree with one of the retiring speakers who said that the administrator has to go. And I just want to remind the body that the administrator did go. And then she came back. She actually resigned in one of the hearings we had. And then, you know, there was another hearing a few months later and she popped up and I was the one who said, Lana, I thought you resigned. And so I definitely think the management has been the issue. You know, we've seen time and time again, politics paralyze our people's health care. And so I'm not always the biggest fan of public-private partnerships, but I definitely think that, you know, we need to take a shot with this. I think the bill's very thorough. And I don't want to stand here and make the case against GMH management, but I think it's very clear it is mismanagement. There's a lot of mismanagement going on over at Guam Memorial Hospital. Just look at some of the things that we hear about, what we read about in the hospital. It's usually not about the healthcare. It's about above step hiring of non-medical personnel. Non-medical personnel. It's about a chief medical officer waltzing into the hospital with a gun, loaded, unloaded. I don't know what the straight story is, but the fact remains that we absolutely have to take the politics out of our people's health care. And I think with this PPP, it's 3 Ps, but politics is not one of those Ps in there. So I implore my colleagues to support this measure, and I pray for its swift passage. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I commend the author again on her due diligence in really looking at the heart of the matter. I mean, sometimes when you look at a problem like GMH, I mean, even the schools, right? You look at these problems and they just seem too big to even chip away at. But I agree, the root of the problems at the Guam Memorial Hospital, it's relative to the political hires and expecting them to run a hospital, and I agree this is a life and death scenario. We need to take the politics out of the picture and hope that it gets better for the people of Guam. So, si Diyos masi, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to rise in support of the bill.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill. On the bill. Gentlelady from Barragata, ma'am, recognize.
Si Diyos masi, Mr. Speaker. I'm actually a believer of PPP and BOT, so I rise today in support of Bill number 1338 COR as amended. First, I'd like to thank everybody who proposed the amendment to tighten the bill. Now, this is basically what we promised the people of Guam, creative solutions. It sets us apart. The 38th legislature sets us apart because we are delivering our promises. This measure represents a meaningful and structured approach to addressing the long-standing operational and financial challenges at the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. The bill establishes a clear and transparent process for exploring a public-private partnership that can bring needed expertise, innovation, and stability to our island's only public hospital. For too long, GMHA has operated under financial strain, often relying on last-minute appropriations and struggling to make necessary investments in infrastructure, staffing, and systems. This bill does not call for privatization. It sets a framework for collaboration, one that protects employees, mandates public review, and requires adherence to procurement and legal oversight. The amendment version of this bill strengthens those protections. It corrects technical issues, ensures the incorporation of current hospital planning, studies like GIDA's RFP 24-006, and clarifies that existing services must be preserved unless explicitly approved for change. It also gives legislature an opportunity to review the proposal or the proposed RFP and financing structure before any formal solicitation is issued. At the core of this policy is a commitment to ensuring that the people of Guam have access to reliable, high-quality health care by developing a structured path for partnership and accountability. This bill gives us a tool to achieve that goal. I commend the committee for its work on the amendments and urge my colleagues to support this measure. Kudos to the author of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're very welcome. On the bill. On the bill. Senator Talai, you willing to close on the bill?
Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleagues for the debate on this measure, the questions. It is a big shift, so I expect more questions, and the more the better. I think we just have to continue to keep asking questions, because it's only with that type of collaboration that we can make things better. Again, the legislature has appropriated 29 million more in 2025, 29 million more in 2025 than in fiscal year 2020. That's a 106% increase over 6 years. 106% increase. And we're still having problems, as described earlier by all my colleagues. We authorized since 2021 the building of the new hospital, the finance, design, build, and maintenance of that new hospital. We allowed GMHA to go for it. We did not put into that law a provision for the operation of the new hospital, and but GMHA has consulted with a consultant since February 18, and in 90 days was expecting a report, and that would have been about May 16, a report that I believe is perfectly timed with this bill being put on the agenda, and I thank the committee for reporting it out, because this will now be able to utilize the findings in that report and to move our hospital forward. I think that consultant contract with GMHA, that assessment, is on top of other assessments that had been done in previous years. And it shows that the governor is leaning towards restructuring the organization, I hope. But this bill will allow the legislature and the people of Guam to see exactly how that is going to be restructured. And especially if they're going to pick up the bill for it, or pledge future revenues for it, that they are going to be able to look at it and improve it. That's the goal, and hopefully that will be what we end up with. It's not a magical solution that makes the hospital profitable, but it's going to put people with credentials focused on hospital management who can help reduce losses and help stabilize care. Our dedicated young healthcare professionals are giving Guam a chance. The dream is coming true in some ways, where our young people who have become educated are willing to come back. Let's show them that we are up to the task of making the changes that modern healthcare requires. One of the ICU nurses who helped us through COVID, testimony really moved me, and it was submitted in writing. And she says that healthcare has changed dramatically just in the past 5 years since COVID-19, and coupled with inflation, medical advancements, changing standards of healthcare, we are seeing decades of poor management boil to a head. I support this bill because I believe it is a start for systemic change for GMH. The systems that GMH was founded on do not serve the best interests of this island. Systems like politically appointed directors of our island's health agencies who lacked the qualifications, credentials, and leadership skills needed to run a healthcare agency. As I have publicly stated before, we need administrators who are hired based on their qualifications, who are credentialed to run healthcare organizations. Administrators who are competent, have experience in the field, and who are qualified to do the job. We cannot continue the appointee system and maintain the "I hope they will do well" attitude when the agency handles the health and well-being of our island. We need proactive leaders who are in touch with our most pressing healthcare needs, and leaders who have the knowledge and innovation to guide us out of the great hole we are in. And then she points out the benefits of the public-private partnership, some of which have been spoke about today. But I'm very grateful that the nurses, the doctors, all the staff of GMH has put in some very hard work. They want to see it succeed. Our community, we all are united in this one thing, and that is we want the hospital to succeed. We are grateful for all the hard work, but we just need to have a new management solution, because money is not necessarily the solution. And that has been proven time and again. 5 years ago, colleagues, I probably would not have agreed to this solution because I believed the promises, and I had high hopes that with gubernatorial and legislative support, GMH would not fail. But despite repeated funding attempts and oversight hearings and pledges of improvement by the management and promises of fiscal oversight by an executive fiscal review committee, we need to do this now because acute care is suffering. Nurses are pleading for our help. We are losing vendors and supplies. We have failed to make repairs or upgrades deemed critical and urgent 5 years ago. We are watching debt grow unchecked. And we cannot continue to simply rob funds from education or safety or housing or other dire community needs to make up for inefficiencies, bad judgment, nor can we risk further reductions in care. And I ask you to please join me, our brave ICU nurse, our fellow business and community leaders who advocate for this public-private partnership, and allow GMH and our new hospital a fighting chance of success by passing this bill to allow the P3 committee of stakeholders to draft an RFP for a public-private partnership for GMH. The legislature will have a chance to look at that RFP, and the costs of such a contract will be hashed out before it proceeds. But we must take that first step now before it's too late and purposely set the contract scope and standards of service our community deserves, and ensure accountability through a deliberate and defined performance contract. So I urge you again, my colleagues, our health chair, our governor, let's do this together, let's do this right now. And I ask those in the public who are listening, who have been right on along our sides in this efforts to help GMH, and who share our concerns about GMH and wish to see a clear and improved path forward through a professional hospital management team, to review this bill online and call your senators and ask them to vote yes on this bill number 13. Introduce Masi again to all my colleagues and to you, Mr. Speaker.
Motion to move the bill to third.
I'll reiterate my motion to put the bill on third reading as amended on the floor and in the committee.
There's a motion to move Bill 13-38 COR as amended in the committee and as further amended on the floor.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker, may I make a motion before that? Could I please add to the sponsorship of the bill Senator Sabina Paris, Senator Tello Taitukui, Senator Chris Barnett, Senator Will Parkinson, Senator Sabrina Salas Montanani, Senator Shelley Calvo, Senator Chris Duenas.
There is a motion for additional sponsors. Any objections? Any objections? No objections, so ordered.
So just Masi, I reiterate my motion to place a bill as amended on the committee and on the floor to the third reading.
On the motion, are there any objections? Any objections? No objections, so ordered. Senator Parkinson, bill number 27-38 COR.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I would like to make a motion to move bill number 27-38, the Hearing Protection Act of 2025, to the third reading, and I would like to discuss.
As amended?
As amended, yes.
You can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we have the Hearing Protection Act of 2025, and I ask my colleagues to please support me in passing this important legislation. Hearing safety, at its core, is public safety. Gunfire noise can cause instant, permanent hearing loss. Suppressors cut gunshot noise by 20 to 35 decibels, significantly mitigating this hazard. This bill protects the right to train. Quieter firearms mean shooters can practice more comfortably and frequently, building proficiency and safety without risking hearing damage. This bill looks to legalize a proven safety device. Federal experts from the CDC endorse suppressors as effective hearing protection, even recommending their use to reduce dangerous gunshot noise levels. Most importantly, this bill empowers self-defense for the vulnerable, especially survivors of domestic violence, often women. This makes it so they can defend themselves and train without fear of hearing injury or disorientation in a crisis. An average of 76 American women are shot and killed by intimate partners each month. We must enable their right to protect themselves. And much deeper, we need to uphold Second Amendment values. Guam's law-abiding citizens deserve the same rights as Americans in 42 states that already allow suppressors. Removing the ban affirms our commitment to the Second Amendment, treating suppressors as safety tools rather than criminal accessories. And always on the back of my mind is Guam's strategic readiness. Our island's World War II history and proximity to geopolitical tensions underscore the value of a prepared populace. Encouraging responsible firearm use, including the use of suppressors, strengthen civilian readiness and honors Guam's legacy and resilience and patriotism. I like to acknowledge that proud history and duty to protect our people and well-being. It's one that's fundamental to us. It's something that has been with us before laws, before words, before society. Though the bill is called 2738, the Hearing Protection Act of 2025, ultimately, this bill is about safety and liberty. I think about the World War II experience and the occupation and the enduring lesson that we must never be caught unprepared again. I want to emphasize that this legislation is part of ensuring our citizens are never left vulnerable, whether from domestic threats or foreign. And the necessity for hearing protection. Gunshots regularly peak above 140 decibels, a level that can cause immediate, irreversible hearing damage. Any noise over 140 decibels is unsafe. Yet even smaller caliber firearms can exceed these thresholds. A .22 caliber rifle produces 144 decibels. A .357 revolver around 172 decibels. These are very low caliber guns, and even this is enough to permanently alter your hearing. Tinnitus and other hearing loss afflictions are common among shooters and hunters who didn't have adequate ear protection. Introducing suppressors is a well-researched solution. I had referenced earlier that they reduce decibels by about 20 to 35. Roughly the same noise reduction as wearing earplugs or earmuffs. And the name of these tools are suppressors, not silencers. Despite what popular media would have you think, these things still pack a significant amount of sound. But that reduction is critical. It takes you from that threshold of immediate permanent hearing loss to something much more manageable. In 2011, the CDC stated, the only potential effective noise control method to reduce noise exposure from gunfire is through the use of noise suppression. Likewise, the 2014 NIOSH report recommended, if feasible and legally permissible, attach noise suppressors to firearms to reduce peak sound pressure levels. And in 2017, the National Hearing Conservation Association urged that using firearms equipped with suppressors is one of several strategies to prevent hearing loss from firearm noise. This bill directly heeds such expert counsel by removing legal barriers so that Guam's shooters can protect their hearing as effectively on the mainland as they do here. I'm a big proponent of training, repetition, practicing your draw, practicing your aim, practicing all of your good standard practices with firearm usage. And you do not get that without practical application and practice. You cannot skip that step. You cannot fake it. You cannot get a sheet of paper that says you know how to use your firearm well. You could only get that with true practice. And repetition to loud decibel noises increase the likelihood that your hearing will be permanently altered. And I do not think that loss of hearing, one of our vital senses, should be a price we pay to protect ourselves. Ultimately, this bill is about empowering our community, empowering survivors, and defending the vulnerable. This legislation is a win for those with the most at stake. Survivors of domestic violence and anyone who relies on a firearm to protect their home and family. I affirm my commitment to the community, to the women of our island, to make sure they have all the tools at their disposal to protect themselves. We must ensure that women and all survivors are not left at a disadvantage when protecting themselves. Think about the scenario where a person who has escaped an abusive partner obtains a firearm for protection. If heaven forbid she ever has to use that firearm in her home defense, that unsuppressed gunshot could be deafening indoors, potentially causing permanent hearing loss and severely disorienting her at the very moment she must stay alert to survive. A suppressor on her firearm could save her hearing, not just in practice, but during the actual use of the firearm in a life and death situation. This bill sends a message. We trust and support survivors to take charge of their own protection, and we are giving them the means to do so safely. And it's not just the problems domestically we have to prepare for. There are dangers abroad too. Our island was the site of one of World War II's most harrowing ordeals. We endured enemy occupation from 1941 to 1944. The people of Guam, largely unarmed at the time, suffered tremendously under that occupation. We remember the stories of our Manamku who were beaten, forced into labor, and worse. History teaches us the value of vigilance and readiness. Fast forward to today, Guam remains America's forward fortress in the Pacific. We are home to a major US military installation, and that prominence puts us in the crosshair of adversaries. So not just for our domestic defense, but potentially for our foreign defense, our people need to practice and need to be prepared. So I ask my colleagues to please support this legislation. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, Senator from Talofofo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of Bill 27-38. This particular measure came out of the committee I chair. Of particular note, the effort so far is one of the most extensive of work that has been done to date by the Committee on Public Safety, Emergency Management, and our Guam National Guard. I thank my staff and the members present for your collective diligence on this piece of legislation. Hundreds of Guam gun users are part of the more than 29 million Americans who enjoy participating in target practice, hunting, and other shooting sports. U.S. citizens both here and across the 4 other U.S. territories and the 50 states own about 310 million firearms, and numbers of female and young firearm users have grown significantly in recent years. Along with this growth should come increased attention to gun safety, including that of our hearing. While shooting sports can certainly be enjoyable, unprotected exposure to high-intensity firearm noise can also put people at significant risk for noise-induced hearing loss and associated tinnitus. Attaching a suppressor or silencer to the end of the barrel can reduce damaging noise, but may not lower it to hearing-safe levels. This means that to effectively protect their hearing, Mr. Speaker, recreational firearm users should always wear proper hearing protection devices on their ears, even when firearms are equipped with silencers. Bill 27 will do just that. In the markup process, Mr. Speaker, the Public Safety Committee, as you know, made a number of significant changes as offered up by the bill's author. Key input from the Guam Police Department guided with the multiple markup versions and inclusion of language that is in line with current Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosive mandates on the use of silencers. Moreover, Bill 27, as mandated, addresses one of the main concerns raised by GPD, that is funding that will be needed to support effective implementation of the bill's provisions. By requiring GPD to begin the process of developing rules, regulations, and fees to help the agency recover administrative costs, Bill 27, as amended, aims to support the true costs associated with the firearm registration process and the internal staff training and certification requirements moving forward. Other amendments, extending the firearms definition to include firearm silencers, defined as any device for silencing, muffling, or diminishing the report of a portable firearm, including any combination of parts designed or redesigned and intended for the use in assembling or fabricating a firearm silencer or firearm muffler, any part intended only for the use in such assembly or fabrication. Also, the committee adopted the definition of firearm silencer established by the U.S. Department of Justice Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Provides also that ownership of firearm silencers is permitted, provided that the specifications, purchase, ownership, possession, and use of a firearm silencer complies with applicable federal and local laws, rules, and regulations. Also, this also requires that in addition to existing firearm ID mandates, the Guam Police Department shall include information on the identification card explicitly indicating the cardholder's authorized ownership, possession, and use of a firearm silencer pursuant to law. It also provides that a person shall be at least 21 years of age to purchase a firearm silencer from an authorized dealer, or at least 18 years of age to purchase a firearm silencer from an individual on a Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives Form 4 to Form 4 transfer, or at least 18 years of age to possess a firearm silencer as a beneficiary or a trust or as a member of a corporation. Also, Mr. Speaker, this measure also requires that under no circumstances shall a person who is authorized to carry a firearm silencer be allowed to transfer the device to another person who is not authorized by law to own, possess, use, and carry such device. The measure also requires that a person who is authorized to own, possess, use, and carry a firearm silencer shall not be allowed to transfer or otherwise lend that device to another person who is not authorized to do so by law. And at the suggestion of the Vice Speaker, and following approval of the committee, providing that under no circumstances shall a person who is authorized to own, possess, use, and carry a firearm silencer be allowed to loan the device to another person who is not authorized by this chapter to own, possess, use, and carry such device, and requiring that the record of ownership and transfer be as approved by the ATF must be provided to the Guam Police Department for each firearm silencer sold or transferred pursuant to this section. The Guam Police Department, Mr. Speaker, is prohibited from authorizing the sale or transfer of a firearm silencer to any person who is not authorized by the ATF to own or otherwise possess such device in accordance with established federal and local laws. Mr. Speaker, the ATF mandates to purchase and possess a silencer are very strict. This Guam law will be equally as tight for legal gun owners to purchase this firearm accessory. I'll say that again, for legal gun owners. The local fees that will be associated with having a silencer is expected to be reasonable, in line with buying one to be much higher than other accessories. I appreciate the work of the committee, and I ask the bill's author today if I can join him as a co-author of Bill 27-38. Mr. Speaker, the work on this measure and the amount of research and input from GPD and the community makes this a significant boost for legal gun owners who wish to add this type of accessory to their gun locker. Practicing will become much more bearable with the silencer, but expect that it will not dampen all the gun sounds that you'll hear at ranges across the island. Bill 27 also protects our Second Amendment rights as U.S. citizens and protects our proud firearm heritage here in the Western Pacific. With that, I thank you again, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to speak on this measure.
You're very welcome. On the bill, Vice Speaker, you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I introduced this piece of legislation back in '36, Bill 73-36. And back then, we were trying to make it legal as well. You know, what's so interesting today is that here we are moving this bill forward, and the hard work that the committee has put into this to make it a stronger bill, that in one clean swoop, this big, the one big beautiful bill that is that passed the U.S. House of Representatives now removes suppressors from the National Firearms Act, or the NFA. And if it's enacted into law, it will no longer be considered a firearm or a weapon. So all this hard work that we put in the committee, come the federal level, that this now will be not considered a firearm or a weapon. But it just goes to show the responsibility that we have in this body in ensuring that the laws that we do move forward, or the bills that we move forward to become law, are those that are responsible. And all the provisions that we placed into this bill, and the author from MTM had worked hard as well to ensure that we continue to move the legalization of suppressors. And he's absolutely right. You know, suppressors are just that. They're not silencers. You can still hear a firearm as it's fired, even with the suppressor on. So all these notes that we've have taken and through the years, and I say years because this was back in the 2021 when I introduced this bill. And now we are here at 2025, and 4 years later, we're still trying to move a piece of legislation forward, which perhaps in the next couple of months would not be needed. But still, I mean, the safeguards that we looked at to ensuring that suppressors are safe and suppressors will be legal here is exactly what we were doing and what we were hoping to accomplish by passing this piece of legislation. So in the end, if the federal side passes, then this would actually become moot. But if it doesn't, at least we have protections in place that will ensure that there are processes that have to be followed, and still registrations and things of that sort would have to be followed. Because on the federal side, it says, on Section 4 of the Hearing Protection Act and the Shush Act reads, Section 4, preemption of the certain state laws in relation to firearm silencers. Section 927 of Title 18 United States Code is amended by adding at the end the following: notwithstanding the preceding sentence, a law of a state or a political subdivision of a state that imposes a tax other than a generally applicable sales tax or use tax on making, transferring, using, possessing, or transporting a firearm silencer or affecting interstate or foreign commerce, or imposes a marking, record-keeping, or registration requirement with respect to such a firearm silencer shall have no force or effect. This provision has the effect of prohibiting states from requiring suppressors to be registered. And that's why I'm saying that should this federal side fail, at least we have now the protections in place and also following the federal standard. So with that, I rise in support of this legislation. And I ask the author as well that I be a co-sponsor.
Thank you, sir. On the bill, gentleman from Ipan, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on this bill. There's a lot of talk about earplugs. I wish I had a pair for some of these over-the-top arguments that we're getting over here. I mean, to imply that if our Manumku, our greatest generation, only had silencers, that they could have somehow staved off the Japanese invasion, I think it's out of order. It's out of order, Mr. Speaker. Further, with all due respect to all of the gun owners, and many of them support me, I don't think this is an issue of the Second Amendment because the Constitution grants us the right to bear arms. It doesn't say that they have to be silenced or suppressed. And I think if you just do it's really a first page Google, case after case, courts have affirmed this. And I'm just a little bit confused by some of the arguments that are being proffered on the floor, relative to are they silencers or are they suppressors? How much do they suppress the sound of gunfire? And Bill's author had said that suppressors reduce the sound of gunfire by about, I think, 25 to 30 decibels. And then he proceeded to read off the decibel levels of different firearms. And so if you just do the math, and this was kind of something that I kind of struggle with in the public hearing, is okay, if 357 decibel levels, 175 decibels, and you minus the 2530 off of that, I mean, 100 decibels is loud enough to cause significant hearing damage. And so I just wonder, I'm not a gun owner, but I just wonder, I mean, doing the simple math, if you fire 357 and it's reduced by 30 decibels, and then you throw in the earplugs, which further reduces it, it's still at the level that causes significant hearing damage. And, you know, and these points are valid. I feel like the gun owners have valid points about hearing protection. But over the weekend, I was at the Mango Festival. We're at the Melissa Memorial. Yesterday, I was talking to people about this week's session and just some of the bills that are on this session agenda, to include this bill here. And one of the gentlemen I spoke to actually yesterday at Melissa, right, where we prayed for peace, he told me, Senator, can you imagine the first time someone goes into the school with a silencer or suppressor, commits some kind of heinous crime? What would happen? And while the concerns of the owners of guns and the protection of their hearing are valid, I think that, you know, as an elected representative who serves as the people voice, I also have to consider the other side to this argument. And I don't think it's an argument rooted in ignorance, because a lot of times when you look at just the literature with the suppressors and the silencers, some of the proponents are very dismissive. They say, oh, it's not like the movies. You know, you can actually still hear, like I said earlier, it sounds like gunfire is still very, very loud, even with the suppressors. But I think where people are worried is rooted in the trust of our government to regulate silencers and suppressors. I mean, if you just listen to the session we had here today, it's very clear that our government struggles to regulate just about everything. And that's why the people who testified in favor of this bill said that we should be very, very diligent in how we regulate the sale. One proponent even said, make it very expensive. Make it expensive to purchase, make it expensive to register so that we can generate revenue, and so that it would, I guess the train of thought was to kind of keep it out of the hands of the people that we don't want running around with suppressors or silencers on our island. And I think we know who those people are. And I'm not saying that because some would-be bad actors would be able to obtain suppressors or silencers and therefore nobody deserves them. I'm just saying that we have to acknowledge this very real reality, that we are living on an island that is stricken with an illness called crystal methamphetamine. And if our government, which routinely fails to regulate things that should be kept out of certain people's hands, also does that with this issue. I mean, we read all the time about these hardened meth addicts, home invasions, robberies with a stolen firearm, which are also very regulated. Guam's got some of the strictest gun laws in the country. And so I'm not necessarily torn on the issue of the Second Amendment. I mean, that's a given. Who doesn't support the right to bear arms? But I am just troubled in how we're muddying the water relative to making these suppressors and silencers. I mean, the Vice Speaker had said basically that in legalizing these things across the board in that big, beautiful bill or whatever, they're basically validating the argument that these aren't firearms, that these aren't covered by the Second Amendment. And so I just wanted to rise in support and not necessarily against the lobby. I mean, let's be very, very genuine with each other. That's what that public hearing was. I mean, we literally had the gun lobby on the Zoom talking about how this bill would be so great for Guam. And realistically, 42 states have legalized suppressors. 41 of those states allow the use of suppressors and silencers for hunting. And I'm not sure if this bill allows that, but if the author would so yield, I'd like to proffer that question.
Would the author yield to the question offered?
I would, sir. Just give me a minute to recess to confirm some details.
Okay, we'll take a minute recess. Back from recess. Senator Parkinson, you have the
Yeah, so looking at the legislation as written, there's nothing that prohibits it from being used for hunting. The legislation removes the ban for firearm suppressor use. So from my reading of it, if you were to use it for hunting purposes, that would be allowed if you had made all the other requirements.
Thank you. Senator Barnett, does that answer your question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, it does answer my question. And I don't have anything on hand now, but I would just implore the author to amend the bill to, I think it would be prudent to restrict the use of the suppressors and silencers while hunting. We have a very active hiking community, and I'm sure you know, Mr. Speaker, we've actually had instances where people were hunting and unfortunately people were shot, even killed during that. And I just kind of want to go back to what the author of the measure himself said about the sound of gunfire and what it means to people. And I just think that, anybody who's out there in the Halamtano, hiking or whatever, they need to be able to hear that gunshot if someone's hunting. And that, for me, it's apples and mangoes, because that really is, I feel, less to do with hearing protection, as the author, the real gist of the bill seems to be about the training and the practice at the shooting ranges, and less about being able to use this type of attachment for the firearm in the jungle. So, Sijos Masi, again, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to rise and speak on the bill. I just wanted to kind of cover both sides, and also feel like I'm obligated to bring up the concerns of my constituents. So, Sijos Masi.
Thank you very much. On the bill. On the bill. Senator Parkinson, you willing to? What's that? You want to speak on the bill? Okay. Gentlelady from Barragata, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I do want to maybe share the opposing side of this bill, which hasn't been stated on the floor today. So just some testimony, if I can highlight some testimony. So the judiciary of Guam states that the views of the bill is a policy matter to be decided by the legislative body. And it goes on to state, our officers are trained to respond quickly to the sound of gunfire, which is an important indicator in managing, active threat scenarios. And the use of suppressors could hinder the rapid identification of threats within court facilities and during field operations, potentially delaying response time and increasing risk to both our law enforcement personnel and the general public. So the concern is that by allowing or taking away the prohibition of suppressors, that it will actually hinder response by our police department to threats. In addition, testimony by Monica Flores listed a bunch of news reports about how silencers actually exacerbated massacres. So in the Virginia Beach shooting, the article states that silencer used by the gunman who massacred 12 of his co-workers at Virginia Beach Municipal Building made his carnage even more lethal, a survivor said. So one of the survivors said that she thought she heard a nail gun going off, but it was actually a shooter starting his rampage. If it was a regular gunshot, we would have definitely known a lot sooner, even if we would have had 30 or 60 seconds more. The survivor said, I think we could have all secured ourselves, all of us could have barricaded ourselves in. So, we talk about hearing protection, but what about the lives of the community, people in our community? So the effect of the silencer does hinder the response of our police department, which needs every support that we can get from this body. And there's testimony also provided that it does affect it actually exacerbates massacres because the sound of a gunshot is more alarming versus the sound of a silenced gunshot, which, according to this report, sounded like a nail gun. And so I asked this body to really think about, are we protecting our community with this bill? And to really consider that it is our responsibility to support public safety. And for that, I rise in opposition to this bill. Suppressor Masi.
Thank you very much. On the bill, any other senator wishing to speak on the bill? Gentlelady from Zonia, you recognize?
Suppressor Masi, before I proceed, I'd like to ask the sponsor a question, if you would yield. The bill in section 10 on page 8 says that the chief of police shall within 30 calendar days following the enactment of this act begin the process of developing rules and regs to implement. But it's not clear whether he has to begin it within 30 days. There's no ending date, but it looks to me like the provisions of the bill are enacted upon enactment. They are effective In other words, silencers will be allowed even despite the police not yet finishing the process of rules and regs necessary to implement these provisions. So as a sponsor, I mean, that's how the bill reads. So how, I don't know, how are we allowing the chief of police time to make rules? It doesn't seem like we are, if the sponsor would yield.
Did the sponsor yield to the question?
Sure, I'll yield to the question. In terms of the chief of police doing what he needs to do to promulgate rules, that 30 days is there to encourage him to get it done in a quick and orderly fashion. And really, I'm not looking to delay implementation of legalizing this tool if the police chief, for whatever reason, decides to sit on that mandate. And so I'm okay with moving forward with this bill and using that as encouragement for the police chief to get these rules done if he finds it necessary to do so within the next 30 days.
I thank the sponsor for yielding, but Mr. Speaker, my concern again then is very clear that it is impossible to pass rules and regs within 30 days. That's not how our open government or our rules adjudication law reads. It requires that it be published and that you allow for input on those rules and regs. So I think it's ironic that we're just going to say he can make rules, but we're going to make this effective without the rules, and no matter kind of what the police want to put in place. I just share the concerns of the governor when she vetoed a very similar bill last term, and I share the concerns of our community that came out to testify, and I share the concerns of this previous speaker on the bill regarding silencing when guns go off is, by all accounts, going to delay law enforcement response. It's going to put at additional risk those who do not know that there is a gun going off in the area, that there is a potential threat. They will not know. And police are not going to be able to respond timely. That is the reason states did not allow this, such as California, Hawaii, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Delaware. And as one of the previous speakers was showing, some of the states that do allow it are very specific as to what it's allowed for. It's allowed for hunting in those states. But this bill has no parameters such as that. It doesn't limit the silencers to hunting. It doesn't limit the silencers for law enforcement or military use. It doesn't limit the silencers even for training on a shooting range. It allows silencers everywhere in our community. That gun use can be used without anyone around you knowing that you are using a gun. And I know the argument that the sponsor of the bill made was that silencers are going to protect us, but that's not what the testimony has shown. They might protect hearing, but they're not protecting people. We did have lobbyists who said they were in the process of registering, testify on this bill from the states. They said, we're trying to balance hearing protection and people protection. And I'm hoping the governor will be consistent in this matter. And if this bill passes, to veto it again. and where she says that the interests of a few in protecting their hearing by using guns at their choice without earplugs, without protective devices, does not outweigh the interests of our entire community in knowing that police can respond quickly when they hear gunshots, that we can report quickly when we hear gunshots in our house, our neighbors, when we, schools, especially the schools, that everybody will know when a gunshot is going off in the schools. I don't think there's anything that can convince me that there's any kind of interest that outweighs that. They are unprotected students. The only thing that they might have to use to help themselves is their hearing that they heard the gunshot. And then they can put into place all the things that they practice for. Unfortunately, I mean, this is really a sad state of affairs. I don't think there was some testimony. Police chiefs across the nation have opposed bills like this because it puts police officers in danger. That's another one of those things that, if that's the case, then I have no idea why we would even attempt to do that. What outweighs that? We just had the ceremony where we honored during Police Month those fallen public safety officers, police officers. I do not want to put any of them at risk. We know already their jobs are hard, almost impossible, and all the challenges that our public safety officers have, I do not want to be the one that gives them more, that gives them anything that puts their lives more at risk. So I oppose this bill. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. On the bill. Yes, ma'am. You recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can we just take a 1-minute recess? We have just a 1-minute recess. We're talking with legal right now. Thank you.
1 minute recess. Session is back from recess. We're going to go ahead and give you time to be able to take your amendment. You're done? We're not, okay. So there's no amendment? All right. Any senators wanting to speak on the bill? Senator Parkinson, you want to close now, or do you want to wait until after we come back from dinner? Huh? Okay, close it now. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The subject of hearing protection is one that's near and dear to me. You know, in my time as a firefighter, I used to operate chainsaws all the time. Very different from firearms, but where they have a very strong similarity is that we are routinely exposed to decibels over 140. And I remember going in with some fresh 18-year-olds into the grinder, and I was a little bit of a OCD with the PPE. You know, sleeves always down, earplugs always in, safety glasses, gloves, the whole deal. And I had some friends who were much more prideful about PPE. You know, they like to roll the sleeves up, maybe wear shades instead of proper safety glasses, and forget the hearing protection, you know. And I noticed that as our careers went on, as we creeped up closer to a decade of doing that type of work, that I still had my hearing, you know. I didn't have it degenerate the same way some of my peers did, all because I used proper ear protection. And that's why I think the suppressor bill is so important, because one of the big fundamentals of firearm use is practice. Practice, practice, practice. Now, on the basketball court, you know, some people call me the White Iverson. But unlike Iverson, I believe in practice. I think it's necessary for people to practice their draws, to practice how to carry it, to practice how to use their firearms safely in low-pressure situations, so that when the high-pressure situations come, they are ready. That being said, the repetition necessary to achieve that competence, that mastery in that skill set shouldn't be at the cost of your hearing, if it can be avoided. One of the retiring speakers talked about how in the big, beautiful budget bill, suppressors might be changed in classification. So there is a very real possibility that this bill could be moot despite years of fighting for it. And if that happens, so be it. But in the meantime, that budget bill is not yet live. That law has not passed. Both chambers of the House has not been signed by a president. And so until that moment, we got to assume that the law in front of us is the law that we're going to have. And if down the road fees are removed or classifications are changed, then so be it. We'll make the adjustments when we have to make the adjustments. But when I think about the people of Guam and the Second Amendment, we have some of the most stringent Second Amendment laws in the entire country. And I don't think that's right. Not with the amount of crime, with the epidemic of crystal methamphetamine, with some of the violent outbursts we've had over some of these very tumultuous weekends. And I think it's important for people to be protected. Not just the gun enthusiasts, not just the people that are big fans of Rambos and the big guns, but the people who are smaller, more vulnerable, where the power of a firearm can equalize and level the playing field in terms of the differences in strength between the genders or between the different age groups. And so I asked my colleagues to please support this legislation. This is the sort of legislation that I think if it were to be vetoed again, it would be exactly the type of legislation that I would support a veto override from, because I think the time has come. I think situations have changed. When this bill was vetoed before, we didn't have shooting range being shut down over proximity and noise complaints. We didn't have the rampant crime that we do today. And so I think as we go along in these changing times, that we need to adjust the tools we have to protect ourselves in these times. And really, I take the concern of some of my colleagues concerned about active shooter situations, but you know, let's go down that rabbit hole. If we were to have an active shooter situation, who is going to be solving that situation? The person that solves the problem of a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That's unfortunately the truth of it. If we were to have an active shooter situation here in the legislature, what would we do? None of us have any firearms here. It'd be like 100 people versus guerrilla. We're all rushing that person hoping for the best. And it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be like that when there's real people who are afraid in this community. And we know that's palpable. We know it's true. We know people are out there with a distrust of institutions. And in these times of distrust and loss of faith, people lean on themselves. People lean on their families, on their neighbors, on their communities. And we need to give them the tools to empower themselves. Nobody is coming out here to save any of us. We as individuals, we as community members, we as family, we need to look out for each other. And making sure that everybody who wants to take on that responsibility has an opportunity to practice. Practice, practice, practice. So that when the day comes, the day we hope never comes, we are prepared for it. So I'd like to thank all the people who spoke up in favor of this legislation. I'd like to make a motion at this time to add Senator Tony Atta and Senator Sean Gumatautau, and am I missing anybody else? And anybody else who would like to be on, just those two for now. If anyone else speaks up, we'll add them on, but those two gentlemen as co-sponsors.
Okay. On the motion to add Senators B. Anthony Atta and Sean Gumatautau as co-sponsors, are there any objections? No objections.
And thank you to, Vice Speaker Tony Atta for his, what's the word I'm looking for? His pioneer work in originally pushing this legislation forward. I like to think that if I was in that legislature with you, we would have been able to get that legislation over the line together. And I hope that we could do it this term in this session, because I really do appreciate the bipartisan cooperation we're experiencing in this chamber to keep our community safe, to keep our freedoms protected. And I think that, the gun laws here on Guam have been entirely too strict. Ultimately, freedom begets more freedom. And freedom to protect yourself is the original freedom that came before words, before laws, before recorded history. And I think it's important that we respect that and not limit ourselves to tools to protect ourselves in the modern day. As technology becomes more and more advanced, the problems we have to solve in our day-to-day lives become more and more complex. And so with that, I ask all my colleagues to please support me in voting for this legislation. And at this time, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to move this bill to the third reading for voting.
There was a motion to move the third reading, but there is an objection, my understanding? Is there an objection to move this bill to third reading? No objection to moving this bill to third reading? No objection? She had to. Okay. There is an objection, so all those in favor of moving this bill to third reading, please indicate by raising your hand. Motion carries. Okay, colleagues, we're going to go and take a recess for dinner. It is now 6:10. Please be back here by 7:45. Quarter to eight, okay? 7:45. Thank you very much. We're on recess till 7:45 tonight.